He doesn't explain himself every time someone is disappointed. One thing women often respect far more than they openly talk about is a man who doesn't spend his life trying to make sure everyone is comfortable with his decisions. Most people know someone who immediately begins defending himself the moment another person seems unhappy. He explains why he made a choice. He justifies why he couldn't attend something. He gives long speeches about why he said no. He acts as if every disappointed reaction requires a detailed presentation. At first, this can look considerate. In reality, it often comes from a fear of being misunderstood or disliked. The problem is that when a man constantly explains himself, he can unintentionally communicate that he doesn't fully trust his own decisions. It's as if every choice needs approval from the people around him before it feels valid. Over time, people begin expecting explanations because he's trained them to expect one. His energy gets spent managing reactions instead of living his life. The man who quietly earns respect handles these situations differently. If he makes a decision, he stands by it unless he discovers a genuine reason to change it. That doesn't mean he's rude, cold, or dismissive. He can be respectful and considerate while still understanding that disappointment is a normal part of life. Sometimes people won't like your answer. Sometimes they won't agree with your priorities. Sometimes they'll wish you made a different choice. He accepts that reality instead of treating it like an emergency that needs immediate fixing. When he says he can't make it to an event, he doesn't spend 15 minutes apologizing for having other responsibilities. When he chooses a different path, he doesn't feel obligated to convince everyone that it was the correct one. There is a quiet confidence in someone who can tolerate being misunderstood without falling apart. Women often notice this because it creates a feeling of stability. A man who isn't constantly seeking approval tends to feel more grounded. His decisions come from what he genuinely believes is right, rather than from a desperate attempt to avoid disappointing people. That doesn't mean he's selfish. In fact, it often makes him more reliable because his choices are based on principles rather than pressure. People know where they stand with him. They know his yes means yes, and his no means no. He isn't endlessly adjusting himself to avoid uncomfortable reactions. And while this isn't the kind of thing that usually gets praised in public conversations about attraction, it earns a deep level of respect in real life. There is something reassuring about a man who can hear disappointment, acknowledge it, and still move forward without feeling the need to defend every decision he makes. He keeps moving forward, even when nobody is clapping for him. A lot of people are highly motivated when they're receiving encouragement. They're excited when friends support them, when family believes in them, and when results start appearing quickly. The real test comes when none of those things are happening. That's where many people slow down, lose focus, or abandon what they started. Women quietly notice the difference between a man who only moves when he's being praised and a man who keeps going, even when nobody seems to care. The first man depends heavily on outside validation to stay motivated. If the recognition disappears, so does much of his effort. The second man operates from something deeper. He has goals that matter to him, whether they're impressive to other people or not. He understands that some of the most important work in life happens long before anyone sees the results. Because of that, he doesn't spend every day looking around for applause before taking another step forward. What earns respect is not the achievement itself. It's the consistency. Anybody can look determined during the exciting stages of a journey. Anybody can stay committed when success is arriving quickly. The harder thing is continuing when progress feels slow, when setbacks happen, and when nobody is paying attention. Maybe he's building a business that hasn't taken off yet. Maybe he's developing a skill that still needs years of work. Maybe he's improving his health, finances, or career one small step at a time. Whatever the goal is, he keeps showing up. Not because somebody is watching. Not because somebody promised him a reward. Because he made a commitment to himself. That kind of discipline stands out because it's becoming increasingly rare in a world where many people expect immediate results and constant recognition. A man who continues moving forward without external encouragement demonstrates a level of self-belief that can't be faked. Women often respect this more than they openly admit because it signals reliability. Life inevitably brings challenges, disappointments, and periods where things don't go according to plan. When a man has already proven that he can stay focused without constant validation, it creates confidence in how he'll handle those difficult seasons. He's less likely to abandon his goals because progress slowed down. He's less likely to quit the moment circumstances become uncomfortable. Most importantly, his motivation comes from within rather than from the reactions of other people. That makes his actions feel more genuine. He isn't working hard to impress everyone around him. He isn't chasing approval. He's simply committed to building a life that reflects what he values. And people tend to respect that far more than they respect someone whose effort depends on whether the crowd is cheering or silent. He doesn't turn every problem into an emergency. Life has a way of testing people when things don't go according to plan. A delayed payment, an unexpected expense, a disagreement, a setback at work, a stressful week where nothing seems to cooperate. These moments reveal a lot about a person's character. Some men react to every inconvenience as if the world is falling apart. A small problem becomes a major crisis. A misunderstanding becomes a disaster. Their emotions swing wildly depending on whatever challenge appeared that day. Being around someone like this can feel exhausting because every issue demands immediate attention, immediate emotion, and immediate reassurance. The atmosphere around them is constantly tense. Even when the problem itself is manageable, their reaction makes it feel overwhelming. Over time, people stop seeing them as a source of stability and start seeing them as another thing that needs to be managed. The men who quietly earn respect approach difficulties differently. That doesn't mean they ignore problems or pretend everything is fine. It means they keep their perspective. When something goes wrong, their first instinct isn't panic. Their first instinct is to assess the situation. They ask themselves what can actually be done, what matters right now, and what doesn't deserve their energy. Instead of making the room more chaotic, they bring a sense of calm into it. They understand that most problems become harder to solve when emotions take control. Because of that, they focus on solutions before reactions. People often mistake this for emotional detachment, but it's usually the opposite. They're fully aware of the situation. They've simply learned that panic rarely improves outcomes. The ability to stay composed when things become difficult is a skill that becomes more valuable with age because real life consistently rewards people who can think clearly under pressure. He can sit alone without feeling lonely. One of the most underrated qualities women respect is a man's ability to enjoy his own company. That might sound simple, but it's much rarer than people think. Many people spend their lives trying to avoid being alone with their thoughts. Every quiet moment gets filled with distractions. Every empty evening must be occupied. Every period of solitude feels like something is missing. As a result, relationships sometimes become less about genuine connection and more about escaping loneliness. The man who gets trapped in this pattern often clings too tightly to relationships because he sees them as his only source of fulfillment. If a woman becomes busy, he feels neglected. If she needs space, he feels rejected. If she's unavailable for a while, he feels abandoned. His emotional state becomes heavily dependent on constant interaction because being alone feels uncomfortable. That pressure can quietly drain the relationship because one person is being asked to fill a void that existed long before they arrived. The man who earns respect has learned something different. He enjoys connection, companionship, and love, but he isn't afraid of solitude. He can spend time by himself without immediately feeling like something is wrong. He has interests that keep him engaged, goals that keep him focused, and a life that continues moving whether he's spending the evening alone or with someone else. This doesn't make him distant or antisocial. In many cases, it actually makes him more present in relationships because he's there out of desire rather than desperation. He isn't constantly looking for someone to rescue him from boredom, loneliness, or dissatisfaction. He already knows how to create meaning in his own life. That self-sufficiency creates a different energy. People feel less pressure around him because they know he isn't relying on them to carry his entire emotional world. Women often respect this because it signals emotional maturity. A man who can sit alone without feeling lonely tends to make better decisions in relationships. He is less likely to stay with the wrong person simply because he fears being by himself. He is less likely to tolerate unhealthy situations just to avoid an empty house or a quiet weekend. His standards are often stronger because he knows being alone is not the worst outcome. In fact, he understands that peace by himself can be far better than constant frustration with the wrong person. That mindset changes everything. Instead of desperately needing a relationship, he chooses one when it genuinely adds value to his life. And there is something powerful about being chosen by someone who is perfectly capable of being happy on his own. People naturally respect those who can enjoy companionship without becoming dependent on it, because it shows that their presence comes from choice, not necessity. He doesn't change personalities to fit the room. You can learn a lot about a man by watching him in different environments. Watch him with friends, watch him at work, watch him around strangers, watch him around people he wants to impress. Some men become completely different people depending on who is standing in front of them. Their opinions change, their behavior changes, their values seem flexible. Around one group, they act tough. Around another, they become overly agreeable. Around influential people, they suddenly start saying whatever they think will earn approval. It's as if they're constantly adjusting themselves to fit the expectations of the room. The problem with this approach is that people eventually notice. Even if they can't explain exactly what's bothering them, they sense the inconsistency. It becomes difficult to know which version of him is real because every situation seems to bring out a different personality. When someone is always adapting for acceptance, they often lose touch with who they actually are. The man who earns genuine respect doesn't have this problem. He understands that different situations require different levels of professionalism, humor, or seriousness, but his core character stays the same. The values he holds don't suddenly disappear because he's trying to impress somebody. The opinions he genuinely believes don't vanish when they become unpopular. He isn't rude, stubborn, or difficult simply for the sake of standing out. He knows how to read a room and interact appropriately. The difference is that he doesn't abandon himself in the process. Whether he's speaking to a powerful executive, a close friend, or someone he's attracted to, there's a consistency in how he carries himself. People know what they're getting. They don't feel like they're dealing with a carefully customized version designed to earn approval. They feel like they're dealing with the same person, regardless of who is watching. Women often respect this more than they openly acknowledge because authenticity creates trust. It's difficult to build genuine respect for someone when you're never quite sure which version of them will appear next. The man who remains consistent sends a powerful message without saying a word. He isn't trying to become whatever the moment demands in order to gain acceptance. He's comfortable enough with who he is that he doesn't need to constantly perform. That confidence tends to show up in subtle ways. He doesn't laugh at things he doesn't find funny just because everyone else is laughing. He doesn't suddenly adopt opinions that don't belong to him. He doesn't become a completely different person to win approval from a particular crowd. In a world where many people are constantly adjusting themselves to fit in, there is something remarkably refreshing about someone who remains grounded in his own identity. And that quiet consistency often earns a level of respect that no amount of charm or social skill can manufacture. The interesting thing about respect is that it rarely comes from the things people talk about the most. It usually comes from the habits, decisions, and behaviors that show up consistently over time. A man doesn't earn respect because he demands it. He earns it because the way he lives, makes people trust his character. The man who doesn't constantly explain himself, who keeps moving forward without needing applause, who stays calm when problems appear, who is comfortable in his own company, and who remains himself, no matter who's watching, sends a message that words alone never could. He shows that his confidence isn't dependent on approval, attention, or validation. What makes these qualities so powerful is that they're difficult to fake. Anyone can act confident for a few hours. Anyone can say the right things on a good day. But real character reveals itself in ordinary moments. It shows up when nobody is paying attention. It shows up when life gets frustrating. It shows up when there is no reward waiting at the end. That's why these traits earn such deep respect. They're not performances. They're patterns. They're evidence of a man who has built something solid inside himself instead of relying on the outside world to constantly reassure him. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. The men who earn the most respect are usually not chasing respect in the first place. They're focused on building a life they can be proud of, staying true to what matters to them, and carrying themselves with consistency regardless of who is watching. Ironically, that's often when respect arrives. Not when it's demanded, not when it's pursued, but when it becomes the natural result of the way a man chooses to live every single day.